They fired me from my dream job. 6 months later, I walked back in with the power to change everything. My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 29 years old. 3 years ago, I was escorted out of one of the largest logistics companies in America. At the time, I thought my career was over. What I didn't know was that the people who destroyed my reputation were about to expose their own corruption. And 6 months later, I would walk back into the same building they threw me out of. Not as an employee, but as the person helping decide who stayed and who left. This is my story. It was a cold Monday morning in Chicago. Rain tapped against the glass walls of Titan Freight Solutions headquarters as employees rushed through the revolving doors carrying coffee cups and laptops. Titan wasn't a small company. It managed shipping networks across North America. Thousands of employees. Billions in annual revenue. 43 floors of offices overlooking the Chicago River. For most people, getting hired there was a dream. For me, it was a chance to prove something. At 8:17 a.m., I stepped off the elevator onto the 26th floor, where the operations analytics department was located. Rows of modern workstations stretched across the open office. Large digital screens displayed shipment routes, delivery metrics, and real-time logistics data. People were already busy preparing reports. Phones rang constantly. Managers rushed between meetings. It was exactly the kind of fast-paced environment I loved. What nobody there knew was that I could have taken a very different path. I came from a wealthy family. A very wealthy family. But I had spent most of my life trying to avoid being defined by that fact. I didn't want success handed to me. I wanted to earn it. So when I applied to Titan, I used only my resume. No connections. No special introductions. No family influence. I wanted people to judge my work. Nothing else. For nearly 2 years, that's exactly what happened. I worked harder than anyone around me. I arrived before sunrise. I stayed late. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. If a shipment problem appeared at midnight, I was usually the first person looking for a solution the next morning. I loved the work. And for a while, it seemed like people noticed. Then my reports started attracting attention from senior executives. That's when everything changed. Because that's when Richard Blake started seeing me as a threat. Richard was my manager. Officially, he was director of operations analytics. Unofficially, he controlled everything that happened on our floor. At first, I actually admired him. He was confident. Experienced. Respected by executives. People listened when he spoke. But after working under him for several months, I began noticing a pattern. Whenever a project succeeded, Richard took the credit. Whenever a project failed, someone else took the blame. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His favorite weapon was manipulation. He could make employees doubt themselves while smiling the entire time. One afternoon, I was eating lunch with a coworker named Sarah Martinez in the company cafeteria. Sarah had worked at Titan for almost 8 years. She knew everybody. And everybody trusted her. While we sat near the windows overlooking the river, she suddenly lowered her voice. "Can I give you some advice?" "Of course," I said. She looked around before speaking. "Be careful with Richard." I laughed. "Why?" Her expression didn't change. "Because every person who becomes better than him eventually disappears." I smiled awkwardly. I thought she was exaggerating. I wish she had been. A few months later, Titan faced a serious problem. Delivery delays were increasing across several major shipping routes. Customers were complaining. Executives were worried. Millions of dollars were at risk. I spent weeks analyzing transportation data. Every evening after most employees left, I remained at my desk reviewing shipment records and route performance reports. Eventually, I found something. A new logistics model. A system that could significantly reduce delays. I tested it repeatedly. Checked every calculation. Verified every projection. The numbers were impressive. The solution could potentially save the company tens of millions of dollars annually. Excited, I scheduled a meeting with Richard. I still believed he would support me. I walked into his office carrying a presentation folder. He sat behind his desk reviewing emails. "What do you have?" he asked. I placed the report in front of him. "I think I found a way to reduce delays by almost 20%. That got his attention. For the next 30 minutes, I explained everything. The data. The projections. The implementation process. When I finished, Richard leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he looked impressed. Then he nodded. "Good work." That was it. 2 simple words. Good work. I left feeling relieved. I thought I had done something valuable. I had no idea it would become the biggest mistake of my career. The following week, Titan held its quarterly executive strategy meeting. Department leaders gathered in a large conference room on the 39th floor. Employees could watch portions of the presentation through internal company broadcasts. I sat at my desk while the meeting played on a nearby monitor. Then Richard stepped onto the stage. A slide appeared behind him. The first slide. My slide. The second slide. My data. The third slide. My model. My solution. My work. Richard presented every detail as if it were his own. The executives loved it. The CEO congratulated him personally. Board members applauded. Senior leaders praised his innovation. Meanwhile, I sat silently at my desk staring at the screen. I felt sick. Sarah walked over and quietly sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, she sighed. "I was afraid this would happen." I looked at her. "You knew?" She nodded slowly. "Not this project specifically." "Then what?" "Richard always does this." For the first time since joining Titan, I felt completely powerless. But I still believed the truth would eventually come out. I was wrong. Because Richard wasn't finished. Not even close. Over the next few weeks, his attitude toward me changed. He stopped including me in meetings. Stopped responding to emails. Stopped acknowledging my work. Every interaction became cold and distant. Then one Friday evening, after most employees had gone home, he walked to my desk. "I need you to update several shipment databases before Monday." "Okay," I replied. He handed me a list of files. "Make sure they're completed tonight." I opened the records and began working. Everything seemed normal. Nothing looked suspicious. So I finished the updates and went home. I had no idea I had just stepped into a trap. The following Monday started like any other. At least, that's what I thought. I arrived at the office a little before 7 a.m. The sky above Chicago was gray and heavy with rain. Employees were slowly filling the 26th floor. Coffee machines hummed. Phones started ringing. Computer monitors lit up across the department. Then suddenly, everything stopped. One of the giant logistics dashboards turned red. Then another. And another. Within minutes, shipment alerts began flooding the system. Major delivery routes across the country were failing. Trucks were being rerouted. Warehouses couldn't access shipment records. Customer orders were disappearing from tracking systems. Panic spread through the office. Managers rushed between desks. Executives started calling. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Nobody understood what was happening. Around 8:30 a.m., Richard appeared beside my desk. For the first time in weeks, he seemed interested in talking to me. "Conference room. Now." His voice was cold. I followed him. Inside the room were 3 senior managers and someone from human resources. My stomach tightened immediately. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Richard placed several printed documents on the table. "Can you explain these database changes?" I looked at the reports. The modifications listed under my employee account. Some were mine. Most weren't. Several critical numbers had been altered. Entire shipment records had been changed. Delivery schedules had been modified. I stared at the pages. I didn't do this. Richard crossed his arms. Your login credentials say otherwise. I never touched those files. The records disagree. I felt my heart begin racing. Something was happening. And suddenly I understood. The Friday assignment. The database updates. The missing meetings. The strange behavior. This wasn't an accident. It was a setup. Someone had been preparing this for weeks. And that someone was standing directly across from me. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. Titan launched an internal investigation. The IT department reviewed system logs. Human resources conducted interviews. Executives demanded answers. Every day felt like a trial. And every piece of evidence seemed to point toward me. Emails appeared showing approval requests. Documents carried my credentials. Database records showed changes made under my account. No matter how many times I explained that something was wrong, nobody listened. Because on paper, I looked guilty. I barely slept. I stopped eating properly. Some nights I sat in my apartment until 2 in the morning reviewing every email I had ever sent. Searching for something. Anything. A mistake. A clue. Proof. But I couldn't find it. One afternoon Sarah stopped by my desk. She looked worried. You okay? I forced a smile. Not really. She sat beside me. I believe you. I looked at her. That makes one person. Sarah hesitated. Then she quietly said something I never forgot. The truth doesn't always lose. At the time, I wasn't sure she was right. 3 days later, I received an email from Human Resources. Mandatory meeting. 11 a.m. Conference room 4B. I knew exactly what it meant. The investigation was over. And they had already made their decision. When I entered the room, Richard was sitting near the window. 2 HR representatives sat across the table. A termination packet rested in front of him. Nobody smiled. Nobody made eye contact. One of the HR managers cleared her throat. Olivia, thank you for coming. I already knew what was next. After several minutes of corporate language and legal explanations, she finally said the words. We have decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. Just like that. 2 years of work. Gone. No warning. No second chance. No opportunity to defend myself. Finished. I looked around the room. Nobody seemed interested in hearing my side anymore. The verdict had already been delivered. Then I looked directly at Richard. For a brief moment, I saw it. Relief. He thought he had won. I signed the paperwork. Closed the folder. Stood up. And walked out. 30 minutes later, security escorted me through the lobby. Employees watched from behind glass walls. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked surprised. A few whispered. The elevator doors closed. And for the first time since joining Titan, I cried. Not in front of anyone. Not in the office. Not during the meeting. But alone. Inside my car. In the parking garage. I sat there for nearly an hour. The rain struck the windshield while I stared at the steering wheel. I wasn't crying because I lost the job. I was crying because I had trusted people who never intended to be fair. Eventually, I picked up my phone. And made a call. The number was one I rarely used. The voice answered almost immediately. How bad is it? Worse than I expected. A few seconds passed. Then the voice asked quietly. Are you sure? Yes. Silence. Then a simple response. Okay. I'll handle it. The call ended. And I drove home. 3 weeks later, strange things began happening at Titan. An outside law firm arrived. Then forensic accountants. Then independent auditors. Employees assumed it was routine. Executives weren't concerned. At least not at first. Then investigators started requesting documents. Thousands of documents. Emails. Performance reviews. Promotion records. Financial approvals. Internal communications. Everything. People began getting nervous. Especially Richard. Because investigators weren't looking at one incident. They were looking at years of behavior. And the deeper they searched, the worse things became. They discovered altered performance evaluations. Manipulated reports. Stolen project credits. Fake approval chains. Unauthorized bonuses. Deleted complaints. Former employees came forward. Current employees began talking. Anonymous whistleblowers appeared. And one name kept appearing again and again. Richard Blake. By the fourth month, panic had spread throughout the company. Several executives hired attorneys. Board members demanded emergency meetings. Human resources leaders were being questioned. Departments were placed under review. Richard stopped acting confident. People noticed. He stopped joking. Stopped attending social events. Stopped making eye contact. Every day seemed to make him more nervous. Then came the morning everyone remembered. Richard arrived at headquarters shortly after 8 a.m. He scanned his access badge. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. A security supervisor approached him. "Mr. Blake, we'd like you to come with us." Employees watched through the glass walls. The same way they had watched me. Only this time. Nobody looked surprised. 1 month later, every employee at Titan received an email. Mandatory all-hands meeting. Attendance required. Rumors spread immediately. Nobody knew what was happening. The main auditorium was packed. Hundreds of employees filled the room. The CEO stepped onto the stage. His expression was serious. Behind him appeared a presentation slide. The words on the screen read, "Corporate Accountability Review." The room became silent. Then the CEO began explaining the investigation. How evidence had been manipulated. How complaints had been ignored. How managers had abused their authority. And how one employee had been falsely blamed. My name appeared on the screen. A murmur moved through the audience. Then the CEO said something nobody expected. "We owe Olivia Bennett an apology." The room became completely silent. And then he continued. "There is one additional fact many of you don't know." The next slide appeared. A photograph filled the giant screen. Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. Because standing beside me in the picture was one of the most powerful investors in North America. My father. Jonathan Bennett. The majority shareholder of Titan Freight Solutions. The person who had authorized the investigation after learning what happened. For nearly 2 years, nobody at Titan knew we were related. Not even the CEO. Then the doors opened. And I walked inside. The same building. The same auditorium. The same company. Only this time, nobody was whispering. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was looking away. I stepped onto the stage. Looked across the room. And spoke. I never wanted special treatment. The room remained silent. I never wanted power. I paused. I only wanted fairness. Many employees lowered their heads. Some looked emotional. Because they knew exactly what I meant. Then I smiled. Not because I had won. Not because Richard had lost. But because the truth had finally arrived. And sometimes, that's enough. 1 year later, Titan became one of the highest-rated employers in its industry. Employee turnover dropped. Profits increased. New reporting systems protected workers from abusive managers. And I was asked to help lead those reforms. Not because of who my father was. But because I understood exactly what happened when fairness disappeared. People often ask whether I ever got revenge. The answer is simple. No. Revenge wasn't watching Richard lose everything. Revenge was proving that he never had the power to define my future. And that's a lesson I'll never forget.